Hey guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Becca and today we will be discussing my best books of 2018. So this video is the culmination of my week of wrap-ups. This week I have posted my most disappointing, most surprising, my worst books, and now my best books of 2018. I will link all of those in the description box for you to check out if you have missed any. But today I don't think this video really needs any explanation. These are the best books that I read in the year of 2018. They are somewhat in order, although pretty much the top 4 I love equally. I don't have one favourite book that I read this year. I read a lot of 5-star books. Some of them were so good that I really can't order them, and they are just amongst my favourite things I have ever read. What I will say is that there were originally 13 books on this list. However, I'm a top 10 kind of gal, so I'm going to bundle one together with another book in the same series, and there will be 2 honourable mentions. So let's get started with the honourable mentions. I'm just going to touch on these briefly. The first one is This Modern Love by Will Derbyshire. This is a non-fiction based on a study that Will Derbyshire carried out, and he asked a group of people 5 questions about love, and this is a collection of letters, emails, poetry and photos that people submitted in response to his questions. The book is split into 3 sections. The first one focuses on the beginning of a relationship, the second section focuses on long-term relationships or people in relationships, and the third section focuses on breakup. I really liked this. It was very melodramatic in places and very angsty. Some of it was just really wholesome and heartwarming when it was older people talking about their marriages, and as like a poetry collection, non-fiction kind of thing, which isn't really something that I'm interested in, I really loved it. My next honourable mention is Rat Queens by Curtis J. Weeb and Rock Upchurch. This is a graphic novel fantasy series that's kind of like an RPG fantasy game sort of setting that follows 4 battle maiden mercenaries and just the quest that they go on, their love lives. It's an adult graphic novel series. There's like nudity and violence and stuff, but I really loved this. I love the characters and I love the plot. However, the artist does change in some of the later volumes and I'm not such a fan of that, but the first volume and the second volume in this series were really good and I would recommend them. So getting into my top 10 best books of the year, coming in at number 10 is Traitor to the Throne by Alwyn Hamilton. This is the second book in the Rebel of the Sands trilogy, which follows a young girl from a dusty dead-end town who dreams of getting away before she is married off by her uncle. A foreigner swoops into town and she runs away with him. Her ambition is sort of to gain her freedom and head to the city and build a life with her aunt, but she ends up embroiled in this plot of politics and rebels and genie. I haven't read the third book in the series yet, and I found the first book to be just kind of average, although I did read that when I wasn't in a good headspace. But the second book, the first 100 pages are kind of all over the place, but the rest of it was absolutely amazing. In this book you move from the setting of like the dusty town and traveling through the desert to the Sultan's palace, and I really loved the atmosphere and the setting. It was very exotic, it contained a lot of intrigue, and I just found the characterizations, the plot and the setting to be absolutely breathtaking. It's a wonder that I have not managed to finish this trilogy yet, but it is in my January TBR. Like, it's part of my Bookopoly TBR, so I do have to read it, and I'm hoping that the third book follows more in the footsteps of this one than the first one. At number 9 we have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a historical fiction that reads more like a contemporary romance, and it is about an aging starlet, Evelyn Hugo, who hires a journalist to tell her life story. Although the journalist is not really successful, she's trying to work her way up the ladder at the publication that she works for, so she really doesn't understand why this really popular Hollywood actress has asked her to write her memoir. This book tells Evelyn's life story, paying particular attention to the 7 husbands that she had, because the question that everybody wants an answer to is who was the husband that Evelyn loved the most. I really liked this. I thought it was very emotionally impactful. It didn't make me cry, which is why it's so low down on the list. Like, I rate my books based on the emotions they evoke pretty much, so the more a plot or a book affects me, the higher I regard it, because I don't feel human emotion very often. I really liked the character of Evelyn. She took no prisoners, she was feisty, she was ballsy, she wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She started off in not very good place in life, and there is a lot of social climbing involved. Some of the husbands were just for social status, some were for appearance, some of them she actually loved, and I just loved the contrast of all of the different husbands and the different reasons why she married them, and the great story of her life, her coming to terms with who she truly was. This book also has LGBT rep, which I really appreciated, and Evelyn Hugo is I think she's biracial, I think she's Cuban American. So it had a lot of diverse representation on those fronts, as well as providing a really emotional, entertaining story. One of the highlights of this book is that it reads like an actual memoir. Like when you read it, you can actually believe that Evelyn Hugo was a real person, and you have to give points to Taylor Jenkins Reid for that, to make it feel so realistic that when you have finished this book, you are actually shell-shocked that Evelyn Hugo never existed and is a work of fiction. At number 8, we have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy. I did read the entire trilogy this year. Book 1 is definitely the best, but all 3 are very different. This is a science fiction story, and it takes place in this area of wilderness where very strange things happen. A government agency has been tasked with finding out what happens in that area, why it's closed off, why does nothing come out of it the same way that it went in. And you follow, I think it's either Expedition 12 or 13, as they are sent into Area X to discover its secrets. Now, the thing that I really liked about this book is that you leave the book with more questions than you did at the beginning. As you guys know, I am not a fan of speculative endings, and while there is only the first book on this list, when you get to the end of the trilogy, it doesn't really answer any questions, but I still kind of really liked that because it gave me enough that I was satisfied, but kind of left it open. I do wish it was wrapped up, but this is one of the rare cases where I don't mind speculative endings. Why this book is on my favorites list is because I don't generally read series back to back anymore. Even if I read a full series in a month, I will put other books in between to kind of split it up so I don't feel like I'm just reading the same thing and not making any progress. But these books were so compelling that as soon as I finished this, I had to pick up the second one, and then about a week after I finished the second one, I then picked up the third. I was just so thoroughly sucked into this world and wanted to know what happened. There's so many mysteries, so many strange occurrences. It is very, very bizarre. A lot of things are nonsensical, but this is kind of like a horror sci-fi, and it is definitely the unknown and the very strange things that are happening that kind of send chills down your spine, because everything's very strange, it's unexplainable. People are searching for answers, every answer just leads to more questions. It's very complex as well, and I do feel like that this is a series that will make a lot more sense if you read it again after you've already read it with the knowledge you've gained from the later books, and you can kind of tie things together a little bit better. That being said, this is intentionally ambiguous. The question of whether this is like an alien phenomenon or an environmental phenomenon is kind of left open. There's little hints about theories of what could have caused Area X, but it is very much left open to interpretation. I am satisfied with the conclusions that I took from this book. Somebody else reading it could take completely different messages and draw other conclusions, but I still think that this was very well done, especially for the size of the books. I would probably recommend this for people who have already read a little bit of sci-fi. I do think that if you go into this not having experienced the sci-fi genre very much, that you won't really enjoy it and it won't make a lot of sense to you. Speaking of science fiction, at number 7 we have Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a standalone virtual reality science fiction that follows a boy called Wade Watts who lives in the future where everything's kind of run down. I get the feeling that we're kind of on the end of environmental and economical collapse, and so a virtual reality world called the Oasis has been created where people essentially live out their lives because everyday life is just so miserable and dull. One of the creators of the Oasis died a while back, and he left an Easter egg hunt littered throughout the world of the Oasis, and whoever reaches the end of the hunt will inherit the Oasis and all of the creators' finances and things like that. So this follows Wade Watts, who obviously stumbles across the first Easter egg, which causes an agency who have essentially banded together to solve the Easter egg riddles so that they can be the winners and sort of share it as a company. However, it would just be like the company wins and the employees just like get paid. I really enjoyed this. As I said in my most surprising reads, I have discovered that I really like virtual reality sci-fi. I like the questing elements. There's a lot of talk of grinding for levels in here, which I really appreciated. I loved the high action plot, which is strange for me. I'm not an action loving person. That extends to movies as well as books. The time that the Oasis was created and the time that James Halliday, the creator, grew up was the 80s, and so littered throughout the world of the Oasis is lots of 80s references, which I really appreciated. I didn't get all of them because I wasn't kicking around in the 80s, but the ones that I did understand I really appreciated. I also really loved the Easter egg riddles. I thought they were really interesting and I loved the way that they were solved. And overall, I just thought that this was a really enjoyable read. At number 6, we have Warstorm by Victoria Aveyard, which was the conclusion to the Red Queen series. I read Red Queen when it was first released, so I have been following this series the entire way through its publication, and this follows a girl called Mare Barrow who lives in a society that is divided by the colour of blood. Red bloods are just normal humans and are the commoners and peasants of the world, and silver bloods have superpowers and are the elite. Mare Barrow discovers that she has some sort of power and then is dragged into the royal court while the silvers try and explain away why Mare has these powers when she is just a low-born red girl. One of the reasons I really love this is that Victoria Aveyard's writing has come a very, very long way since the first book. You can see that she's improved in leaps and bounds. I found the writing in this to be absolutely amazing, especially compared to Red Queen, which I did really, really love, but this was just like something else, and I'm very excited to see what she puts out in the future. The action scenes in this, I could feel them playing out in my head like a movie. Like there's one scene where Evangeline is like leaping on top of a truck, and as debris, like metal debris, is falling down, she's like turning it into balls and like discarding it, and it was just like amazing. I absolutely loved the high action. I thought that the ending of this was wrapped up nicely, aside from some of the relationships between characters was left undone. However, there will be a follow-up collection of novellas in this world which will follow certain characters and wrap up their storylines, so I'm very excited to read that. I do believe it will be released in 2019. Now into my top 5. These are some of the best books I have ever read. I absolutely loved them. I would recommend all of them to you guys. They are just so good. So number 5 is The Beast Player by Nohoko Uehishi. This is a very, very underrated young adult fantasy. It is translated from Japanese, and I found this to be absolutely magical. So this follows a young girl called Evelyn, and her mother is the keeper of some warrior snakes. One day the warrior snakes all die, and Evelyn's mother is held accountable. Evelyn's mother then sends her away so she doesn't have to suffer the same fate and alienation as her mother will. One day she is introduced to the royal beast, and this starts this beautiful magical plot. Honestly guys, this is one of the most atmospheric and absolutely stunning books that I have ever read. If any of you guys are fans of Studio Ghibli, I would highly recommend that you pick up this book, because as you read it, it has that same sense of like wholesomeness and just like picturesque beauty that Studio Ghibli movies have, and I could just feel it like playing out in my mind like Spirited Away. It was absolutely beautiful. Honestly, I've said beautiful so many times, but I just cannot capture how absolutely atmospheric and picturesque this book was. I also really loved it because it centers around animals. You have the royal beasts and obviously the warrior snakes that I mentioned, and I think that this book carries a very good message about the nature of animals and how far humans should interfere with them and their habitats, and whether they should be tamed or left to be wild. As somebody who owns a pet meerkat, like that is a very valid argument. I think when I read this book it only had about 200 ratings on Goodreads. This has been published only in the UK at the minute, translated, so you can get a hold of it on Book Depository, but if you guys are in the US, I do believe that it is being released in the US in March of 2019, so you can wait to get a copy of it then. I really do hope that its US release like makes it soar in popularity, because it's absolutely beautiful and more people definitely need to read this. Like, people reading this book, this is the hill that I will die on. This book needs more people to read it. At number 4 we have Stormdancer by J. Kristoff, and the top 4 in this list are definitely 100% tied, because I'm currently almost finished with the second book in this series, and it is one of the best things that I have ever read. So this is an adult fantasy dystopian. I feel like it has dystopian and fantasy elements in like equal measure. It is set in Japan, and it follows Yukiko, who is the daughter of the official huntsman of the shogun. Now the shogun has suddenly decided that he wants to own this mythical beast called a thunder tiger, who is half eagle, half tiger. He is mythical, so people aren't sure if they ever existed to start off with, and this world is also heavily polluted because of the lotus fumes that the people burn to fuel absolutely everything. So even if the thunder tigers did exist, the chances of them still existing when things like dogs and birds are extinct is very, very slim. However, Yukiko and her father can't say no because they will be executed, so they go on this impossible mission to find a thunder tiger. As you can tell from The Beast Player, I really love Asian and Asian inspired fantasy. That is my thing, and I'm gonna make it my thing because I absolutely adore it. This is not the the beautiful picturesque setting of the Beast Player. However, this is a very complex and gritty setting, as well as the corrupt government of the shogunate. You also have the chapter house, which is a sect of almost religious type beings that wear metal suits, and they're all about machinery, and the motto is like the lotus must bloom, and they are forcing this country to its knees and on the verge of environmental collapse because they want everybody slaved to the lotus bloom, because as well as burning it for fuel, people do also smoke it, kind of like poppies and opium, that kind of thing. Something I really need to tell you guys is that my Nevernight hoes, like you guys out there who absolutely adore Nevernight, you are sleeping on Stormdancer. I don't know too many people who have read this trilogy, but guys, you are seriously sleeping on it. It is one of the best things that I've ever read, and if you love Nevernight, I can 100% guarantee that you will also love this once you've got to grips with the Japanese setting, which actually was not as hard to get into as I expected, especially as it uses a lot of Japanese terminology. I love the absolute complexity and brutality of this world. J. Kristoff at his finest, even though this is his first published work. It's brutal, there's betrayal, there's murder, there's gore, there's foul language, there's nudity, and everything that J. Kristoff just does really well is packed into this book. Like I said, I am almost done with the second book, and I can confirm already that you will see that in my best books of 2019. I have about 60 pages left, and the stakes are even higher. What I will say though, if you want to enter into this trilogy, the second book does contain trigger warnings for rape, domestic abuse, graphic violence. It's a little uncomfortable to read at times, so if you are sensitive to any of those topics, probably don't even start the trilogy to begin with, because if you get hooked in the first book, the second book contains a lot of dark shit. At number 3, we have the Saga graphic novel series by Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples. I'm holding the first book here, but seriously every single installment of this graphic novel. I had this on my shelves from last summer, so like summer 2017, and I picked it up for a readathon, and I cannot believe how long I have been sleeping on this. This is one of my favorite things ever. Before I read this, I didn't like graphic novels. The only ones I'd ever read were The Walking Dead, and this just really blew my mind. So this follows 2 aliens from warring planets who fall in love and they have a baby. Mercenaries are sent from all various places across the universe to sort of kill the parents, capture the baby because she's an abomination. Some of them are out to gain some political advantage in the war. You follow not only this family, you follow the mercenaries and the problems that they have. So when you get like a few volumes deep into this, you care about every single character, and when they clash, you're not really sure who you're rooting for. You may prefer some more than others, like my favourites will always be Marco and Alana, but you become emotionally attached to every single character. Now I know that I have said that the entire series is on this list, however I will say that my favourites are probably volumes 1 to 3 and the latest installments, and the lowest points were probably volumes 6 and 8. There is a lot of time in these graphic novels that is just spent chilling out with the characters and exploring emotional bonds between them. There are a lot of new characters introduced as well. There's trans rep in this, there's gay rep in this, there's also POC rep, so it is very, very diverse. And if you really like stories that sort of grip your heart and carry an emotional punch, then I think you will really, really love this one. Coming up at number 2, we have Rouge Dreamer and Muse of Nightmares by Laini Taylor. These are the 2 that I have bundled together. However, if they were included separately on this list, Muse of Nightmares would be below the top 5, and Strange the Dreamer is the one that really, really stands out. So Strange the Dreamer follows young Laszlo Strange, who is a librarian, and his entire life he has dreamed of discovering this lost city of Weep. Now Weep used to exist a long time ago, and it did have a different name. However, they just kind of fell off the map. They used to send trade caravans and they disappeared, and then one day the name of Weep also disappeared off everybody's tongues, which was left with the name Weep, and every time anybody speaks of it, they taste tears. Now, I know a lot of people complain that people don't really give a good plot summary of this book, but I do think it is really difficult to describe. There is a lot of complexity in this book, and it is underpinned with Laini Taylor's absolutely beautiful writing style. There are a lot of dark topics explored in this, including the massacre of almost an entire species and the rape and enslavement of a civilization. So if you think any of those will make you uncomfortable, then maybe steer a little clear. It isn't something that personally bothered me, but I did help to host a read-along of this book earlier in the year, and a few people were bothered by those topics. So that is just something to be aware of. The main thing of value in this duology is Laini Taylor's absolutely beautiful and stunning writing style. That woman could write. I had the absolute pleasure of meeting her in October, I think. So all of my Laini Taylor books are now at least signed, if not personalised as well. I found this book to be very, very atmospheric, even though it is a slow burn. The writing was just so beautiful that I didn't even notice that very little was happening. I absolutely loved the majority of the characters in this, and it is a very morally grey duology. So you have people who are doing bad things, but you don't necessarily dislike them because they have their reasons. Some of it is brought on by trauma, some of it is brought on by vengeance, and everything is very much nuanced and complex, and it's really hard to dislike anybody in this series. Muse of Nightmares I didn't love quite as much as Strange the Dreamer, and I think that is because a lot of the magic and anticipation and the build-up of discovering the secrets of Weep is missing from this because it's already been established. However, the absolute selling point of Muse of Nightmares is Cora and Nova. That's all I'm going to say about them, because if I talk about them anymore it will be major spoilers. But the emotional punch that their narrative delivered was overwhelming, and I absolutely, like, I died, but I loved it. It was good pain, you know, like with something so good and so heartbreaking that it's like a good pain. That's what Muse of Nightmares delivered. And then finally, the #1 slot, my favourite book of 2018. I was like torn about what my top book of 2018 was going to be, because for the majority of the year it was 100% going to be Strange the Dreamer. But like I said, I rank my books based on how emotionally they get me. And this is the only book ever to make me sob and wail like a baby, and that is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. This is the conclusion of the Throne of Glass series, which is a series that does mean a lot to me. For those of you that don't know, Throne of Glass initially starts off following an assassin who has been enslaved and put into some slave mines by the king, and eventually she is released by the prince, who is going to enter her as his tribute in this competition to become the king's champion and essentially the king's personal assassin. These books have come a very long way since then, and that topic is pretty much unrelated by the time you get to the end book. However, there is a section at the end where they're like reminiscing on where they all started out, and I absolutely loved that. This is the end of an era for me, and there's some pretty tragic stuff that happens. There's something that like still bothers me now that happened, and it was so devastating and it broke my heart. But it was kind of fitting, you know, because Sarah J Maas has been criticised before for not really having any casualties of war in her book, and there were definitely casualties of war in this one. And then I did also cry at the end when the book was over, just because of that little section of reminiscence, and also just the fact that this is over. I will never read another new Throne of Glass book, and that is like, it hurt. It really, really hurt. I'm not going to linger on this one too much, because even though it is my best book of the year, it is very, very hyped and you guys know a lot about it. This year I did also do a series of book diaries for every single book in the Throne of Glass series. Kingdom of Ash is yet to go up, but I am going to try and get it up next week because I've been sitting on it for a while. I don't want to deal with the trauma in that reading vlog, but I'm going to have to. For those of you who are wanting to read the Throne of Glass series, what I will say is that please read 2 to 3 books before you give up on it, because that's when the series really picks up. Sarah steps into her writing, and by the time you get to the end of this series, it's just so epic and so complex, and every single thing that has been hinted to in the entire series is like weaving together in the last few books and like comes to a head in this, and it was absolutely phenomenal and I just adored it. So that is everything for my best books of 2018. Please let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them, and also what your favourite book of 2018 was. Please also don't forget to like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you want to. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, Instagram and Twitter if you'd like to follow me on any of those, as well as a link to my Bookish body butter and candle website, the Instagram for that, and a 10% off discount code. But that's it from me today. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you're Hugo and nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.